safety of the people, I think the American government has the right to do whatever.
There's laws in place, they need to be enforced.
Every year, my insurance payments, my premiums go up.
Something's got to be done because there's a lot of people running around without health care.
Obviously, there's a lot of debate as to whether illegal aliens are a positive influence on this economy.
It's hard for us to afford everything the way it is, and then for us to have all kinds of other people to support.
But we are a country of the free, and so I think we have to be very open-minded.
I just think proper education, learning the right things.
When I look on television and I see 3 separate shooting incidents,
I think they need to get tough with it.
Straighten out the politicians.
Keep to their word, and to be honest, I think that's important.
They make a lot of decisions which sort of impact my life, impact the children's lives.
I think it's an obligation to vote. I think we all need to do that.
Welcome everyone, I'm Tom Muellerleile. KSMQ in partnership with KTTC is very pleased to present to you Election 2006, a series of conversations designed to aid you in voting in November. Our coverage represents a sampling of key races from throughout this region. It is KSMQ's plan to continue to build upon this important service by providing even more opportunities to know and to understand the issues at hand and the people who represent you in Washington and St. Paul, your region, your hometown. We are joined today by Republican incumbent Representative Connie Ruth and her Democratic opponent, Ms. Kathy Muellerleile. Both are vying to represent you as state representative in District 26A. And I'll be asking questions compiled by our internal election team, and most importantly, questions submitted by you, our voters. Neither of the candidates has been provided with the questions beforehand, so let's get right into our conversation. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
Business and economic development. District 30 or Interstate 35 currently brings business to the Owatonna area, major part of that district. There are current plans underway for Interstate 14 to Waseca. So what can be done in the House to ensure that businesses continue to be attracted to your areas? We'll start with you.
Well, thank you, Tom. I was on the City Council, and I was a member of the EDA, Economic Development Authority Commission, those years that I was on the City Council. And we believe that because we are in the center of those 2 highways, Highway 35 and Highway 14, that we're such a hub that we have been growing, leaps and bounds. There are problems with growth. You know, you have to be very careful about the infrastructure that needs to be built and where those dollars come from. And we certainly want to be able to attract business and help business be successful in our community. And certainly those roads are important to the continued success of our businesses.
So finding a balance between attracting businesses but making sure that the infrastructure can hold up to that.
And that's the problem right now, okay. as there seems to be a trend with the legislature not to reinvest dollars as we'd like them to in local government aid. Our city is really struggling with that especially. It looks like we're really prosperous, and yet they just had to cut nearly $700,000 out of our budget this year. We're going forward with a half-cent sales tax is the only way. Sales tax increase will be on our ballot November 7th in order to work on some of those roads and projects that
Sure.
we need to be able to support the businesses that are coming.
Okay. Connie, how about you?
Well, I think I should just clarify one piece. You know, certainly I've worked very, very hard to make sure we have the local government aid, but we want to make sure that we tell the whole story. Actually, what happened is that there was one-time money that really came to Owatonna. So Owatonna received an additional $450,000 last year. And so it looks like it's cut so much more because we don't have, so I'd have to say cut with quotation marks because those dollars aren't there, but it was actually one-time money. So it's actually going more back to where it was. But local government aid is something that we certainly need in our area. For the roads, what's so important, and I'm hoping that when we do vote this year, that we'll be able to vote for that amendment that's going to be on, because we do need infrastructure. As Kathy said, it's so important. We have to have the infrastructure. When I was at the Capitol, a year before Coca-Cola came into Owatonna, they came and talked to me about it and said, I see how hard you're working on Highway 14 to make it 4-lane. Mm-hmm. we are looking to come there and put our distribution center there because there'd be 2 4-lanes with Highway 14 and 35. And now we have the money secured for around Waseca to Owatonna.
Let me ask you this. I used to live in that neck of the woods. Why has it taken so long to get that 4-lane in that corridor? I mean, that's a rough road.
It is, and it's been, I think it's been 4 years in a row that it has been the worst, rated the worst road. But we were very fortunate because actually there was a $750 million bond bill, and we were one of only 12 projects that got accelerated. It's a matter of dollars. It's a matter of dollars. Funding for transportation just has gotten left behind. For a number of years we had education and transportation dollars. Then it ended up going more into the legislature changed to education, excuse me, and health and human services, and that just kept growing and growing, and transportation got left. But we're to the point now where we're going to have to do something. Right. I had that bill in 2001 to constitutionally dedicate 100% of the motor vehicle sales tax to transportation, and so that's where we're back again.
Okay, minimum wage. What does the state need to do? What kind of action needs to be taken to address the minimum wage issue? And we'll start with you on that one.
Yes, thank you, Tom. I voted for that bill. I was called one of the 18 moderate Republicans that voted for that bill because as I was looking at that, there are very few that actually are very few employers that are paying minimum wage unless it's a college student or somebody working part-time. So that's what I had in mind, and I believe it's time. I believe it's time. We are, of course, ahead of the federal government in that. We've gone from $5.15 to $6.15 an hour, but
and that was passed last year.
This was passed.
2005?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, this was passed.
Kathy, minimum wage.
Well, I guess I'd rather talk about living wage.
Okay.
Certainly, I can't imagine living on $6.15 an hour.
Right.
And I don't think it can happen. And so we have a lot of people who are full-time jobs who are having to work part-time in order to make a living for their families. And we have more and more folks like that in our communities. There seems to be that trend. We have what we call Job Z zones. We have them in Owatonna. When I was on the city council, we dedicated certain land for those businesses. And what happens is they get free land, in a sense. They get, they don't have to pay taxes on it for many years.
Many incentives.
Many incentives, if you will, corporate welfare in a sense. And then they don't have to tell us that they're going to be sure that the people working for them get a living wage. And I really have a problem with that because many of those people working for them, if they're not getting a living wage, where are they going to get their health insurance? Where are they going to get the things that they need? But go back to the human services for those resources, and that's a concern to me.
So what's a plan that you have to address this more specifically?
Well, there has been legislation proposed, and I know that my opponent has voted against it, but to at least require those corporations that build and bring business to a Job Z zone, that they would at least provide health care for their employees, or a living wage, or the combination of the two, so that they are bringing in good jobs, not just jobs. We don't want just jobs in Minnesota.
30 seconds, Connie. Why did you vote against that?
Well, I'm not sure. This is probably some amendment that came on. Sometimes we get these amendments that are thrown at you to get certain things. We have to look at the cost. I mean, that's the cost of it. 80% of our businesses are small businesses. When you raise taxes, that's raising taxes on them. If we raise taxes on them, it's a job. And in fact, we are #1 in the nation for health insurance. #1 out of our 50 states for health insurance. Can we do better? I'm sure we can, but it's like, how far above 1 do you want to be?
Illegal immigration, undocumented workers, an issue in the Owatonna area, as it is throughout many parts of Minnesota. How do you think our law enforcement officers, how are they reacting to undocumented workers in your region? We'll start with you, Kathy.
Well, it's my understanding that they're trying very hard to build a good relationship with anyone from a different culture in our community, so that those populations who tend to live in similar areas of our community, so that they can feel safe just like everybody else. Right. Those officers are sworn to uphold their safety as well as everyone else's. And I think what I'm hearing from law enforcement is that they don't want to have to be doing the federal responsibilities. Exactly. That should be federal government doing that. And if indeed the federal government wants to be sure to take care of their responsibility in that way, then they need to help us fund that. Our communities, our state, they need to be funding that.
Connie.
It is a federal issue. Definitely immigration is a federal issue, but how it does affect us in Minnesota is on our welfare.
Right.
And that's where at the door, I've knocked about 7,500 homes, and I'm hearing a lot of that at the doors, and people are disappointed by that. I do want to make sure that we clarify, though, that we're talking about illegal, as you said, which is against the law.
Workers,
right. Not legal immigrants, because there is a huge difference. And I'll tell you one other little story. When we had the $4.5 billion deficit, the good news is that it backed us into the wall. We had to figure out what was actually going on. We found out that in the state of Minnesota, as taxpayers, we were paying $50 million for illegal women. And then what that was going to do is that year we were trying to hold the dollars to K through 12 education and nursing homes. Well, it was going to take the money from nursing homes because we weren't going to move on K through 12 education. Those dollars were going to stay there. So what happened, it was either pay this $50 million to illegals or pay nursing homes. And finally the agreement, because it's a compromise between the Senate DFL is majority and the House majority is Republican. So everything that comes out, of course, is a great compromise, and they ended up, the compromise was to pay for illegal pregnant ladies, because as soon as the child is born, they'll be a citizen. And also, we want to have healthy children.
So how do we control this issue? You know, there's talk about beefing up the border control, or perhaps penalizing workers here in Minnesota who hire undocumented workers, illegal aliens. What is a solution? Is there an easy solution?
I don't think there's an easy solution. I just want to clarify that Connie said that they gave this money to the undocumented workers. No one's giving them money. They're not getting, but they're getting services that cost dollars, and those services are health care. And I support the fact that they decided to give health care to undocumented workers who were pregnant, and we want to see that they produce a healthy child, obviously, and take care of their health.
Is that fair for when you have legal residents, citizens here in Minnesota who they tell me, I'm being squeezed out of the system.
Right.
I come to get health care and there's a line a mile long. Yep. I mean, I understand your point, but what do you say to those people?
Well, I say that it is a federal issue, and the federal government needs to enforce its own laws. We need to make sure that our borders are secure. We need to be sure that we're not allowing undocumented workers. We need to have businesses be sure to check on those Social Security numbers that are being used illegally. These are workers who are coming using a Social Security number that belonged to someone else, and there are ways to check that. And the federal government needs to make it easier for employers to be able to check that, so that that's not happening. And that should, then it says to people that are undocumented, there aren't going to be jobs for you here. This isn't going to be the life you're looking for, and that could help to stop it.
Connie.
Sure, there are things we can do on the local level, on the state level, and actually they are handed a check. Welfare is the one is actually handed a check, and then of course there are all these other services that Minnesota does provide, which is great. We're number one in child welfare, and that's wonderful. But there's a cost with it, of course. It's welfare reform. And one of the issues one of the bills that was brought forward was that one would live in the state for 90 days before they were offered services or offered the check. And that we were not able to get that through. But it is welfare reform, and some of that is being done. I can give you a quick example. When we had, for example, child care, and as I say, Minnesota is number one for child care, but with a person whose children would be receiving child care, and they were allowed to miss 10 days consecutively, and then they could, from child care, could go back for 1 day, could miss another 10 days. And so, and of course the state of Minnesota, we as taxpayers are paying for that, and there are children who could be at daycare that weren't able to be there because the place was filled up. So actually, I was asked to please try to help change this. And so anyway, went back to the Health and Human Services Chair, we got that through, and what the compromise is that now the maximum number of days a child can miss would be 20 days out of the year. And that seemed very fair. But it's a compromise. And it's just a number of those things. It's baby steps, but we just keep working on welfare reform.
You keep working at it.
That's right.
Speaking of education, recently there was a report that more than half of Minnesota's children enter school not able to read. Hard to imagine. What is the state's responsibility in reversing this trend? We'll go to you, Kathy, again on this.
Well, education is near and dear to my heart. I'm a former teacher, been on the school board in Owatonna, been on the State Board of Education appointed by Governor Carlson. And it's a very bad thing that children are coming to school unable to be ready to learn.
Right.
And I believe that all children should come to school ready to learn. We know that early childhood, family education programs, appropriate child care for all children, excellent child care for all children, Head Start programs, all are things that really, for every dollar we spend in those programs, we get a service of at least $17 savings in the long run in the reduction of social costs. Less people on the welfare system, less people in law enforcement, in jails, those sorts of things. And yet we only spend 1.6% of the state's budget goes into funding those programs. We need to be sure that those programs are funded, and the parent involvement that comes with those programs is very important too. So you're not only educating the child, preparing the child, it's preparing the adults. In 1999, the monies that our state was spending on early childhood programs was actually 7% more than it is today. It's been cut. My opponent was part of in the 2003, part of cutting those funds for those programs. All day, everyday kindergarten is an important thing too. We've had opportunities to provide funding for school districts for that. Our community is trying to do that. Those funds have not been appropriated.
So Connie, what about those cuts?
Well, that would be 2003. I think maybe I forgot to mention the other part of the story. We're looking at a $4.5 billion deficit. $4.5 billion deficit. We were attacked. And then we have to look at what tough decisions do you make? And that wasn't easy. Absolutely, that was not easy. So most every area was asked, okay, give up what is best for you. You tell us first at the legislature. That's what we did. We went through months of listening to all the organizations and said, this is not good, but here are so many dollars in the pot, just like when you have in your own checkbook. We're stewards of the taxpayer dollar. And I take that very seriously.
So what can we do now?
Absolutely, and this is where we are now, because now we're past that.
Yep.
We're back. We're $4.5 billion deficit.
Look to the future.
Now we're in $1 billion surplus.
Absolutely.
So it's excellent. And actually, I serve on early childhood caucus. We have two of them. There's one that's about 40 of us. It's bipartisan. It's really working. We need to have all these bipartisan caucuses. And I also serve on one there's just 8 of us. There are 4 Democrats and 4 Republicans, and we're studying in depth what programs are working. We've toured different daycare centers. In the city area. I'm trying to encourage them to come down to our area, because then I do want our community to come down, because just to see what is being done, and just to make sure that those dollars, that our taxpayer dollars, are being used properly. What programs have worked, what have not worked, what can we do in the future? And absolutely, we know that we get 17% back. That's what we're told for every dollar we put in. So we're working hard at that. We did put in additional this last year. When we had started back with the surplus, we actually put meaning the legislature, agreed to put $22 million more into early childhood. So I'm very thankful for that, because it's a must. And I have 4 grandkids.
Yeah,
I want to make
this
sure
is especially,
this is very dear to my heart.
For both candidates here. At this part of our conversation, we want to allow the candidate to ask each other a question to your opponent, a big issue that you might have. And Connie, would you like to start with a question you have to Kathy?
Sure. Kathy, I'm just wondering how we would pay for all these things. And you mentioned earlier all-day kindergarten. So how would you pay for all-day kindergarten?
Well, it's very easy.
Good.
The one thing that we could do is that there is actually about $300 million that we could bring in new revenue if the very wealthiest of Minnesotans, top 1%, who are making millions of dollars, would pay the same rate of tax locally and at the state level. I want to get my facts straight. This out here. Right now, the wealthiest Minnesotans are actually paying a rate that is 42% lower than most Minnesotans who are making about $65,000 a year. Then those who are making over $730,000 a year, and there are many of those, they are paying a combined rate of 7.8%.
So your question in 10 seconds is what?
No, my answer. My answer is, how am I going to pay for this? I'm going to make sure.
I'm sorry, yeah.
We're going to make sure that all Minnesotans are paying their fair share. Why is it that the wealthiest are being protected from paying the same rate of tax?
Okay.
Middle class is paying 11% rate. The wealthiest Minnesotans are paying 6.5% tax rate.
Okay.
If they were to pay the same rate of 11.2%, we wouldn't have to burden the middle class, and we'd bring in an extra $300 million a year.
So Connie, 1 minute, how do you respond to that?
Right. I checked this out. I'd actually asked Kathy to give me that information. I haven't received that. But I checked with our House research, which is very bipartisan. And just so that we hear the whole story on that, actually what it is, we're talking about 39 households. 39 households out of 2.5 million households in Minnesota. 39 households receive over almost, they earn almost $22 million a year, that group. And so when you're looking at how much they're paying for taxes, out of all the income they have, of course it comes out to be, what is it, I'm not sure, 70%. Anyway, that's where we get it. And so when we're looking, because we have many regressive taxes, property tax, sales tax, and so those don't change. With income tax, of course, the higher level does pay for it, but we're talking about only 39 households. And we're looking at that level also. They pay actually $112.7 million. So they are paying their, when we talk about fair share, what is their fair share? And when we're looking at 80% of the businesses are small businesses, that's who's in that bracket. And we raise their taxes, we take away jobs.
I wish we had more time, Connie.
That's
Thank
right.
you. Kathy, do you have a question for your opponent?
Those people are not in the small business bracket, obviously, making $21 million a year. But if we did have an opportunity to tax them as the same rate, we would gain new revenues without burdening anyone else.
Okay.
And I think they could well afford it.
Your question to Connie.
My question is that I've been a member of the Owatonna School Board. I've been appointed by to the State Board of Education by Governor Arnie Carlson. I'm dismayed that in 2005, 247 Minnesota schools were ranked or rated as failing by the mandate set out in No Child Left Behind, which is a federally unfunded, inflexible mandate that we have in Minnesota. You had the opportunity to return our schools to the local control of the local school boards instead of having to follow these federal mandates. You must have a plan to turn this trend around, because we know that number is growing and growing. They're telling us Minnesota schools are failing. What's your plan to remedy that, if you believe we must stay with this federal unfunded mandate?
And Connie, you just have a few minutes here.
Okay,
so here's the plan.
Great. You know what I'd like to see with No Child Left Behind? I would like to see them actually, instead of working on the negative, work on the positive and come with incentives instead of saying, you didn't do this and you didn't do this, just like with children, just like with our grandchildren, how it works. When we're looking at money, and of course, Kathy, I'm sure you're well aware of that was the overall compromise that came to. We just couldn't get along with all those dollars, unfortunately, and that is really disgusting when we have a federal mandate that says you're not going to get these dollars unless you do what we say you're going to do. And it's millions and millions of dollars for both our Owatonna and Waseca schools. So we're looking at that, and the schools couldn't possibly have picked that up. But I would, like I say, what I would like to see is just really, and I will talk with our Commissioner of Education about that. That is the promise. I'm going to meet with her on this and say, how is it we can work so that we start changing that so that it's a positive reinforcement for our schools instead of it being something negative. And our Commissioner of Education is Alice Segrin, who is well respected by both Democrats and Republicans, and she has made it her goal to work very hard to try to make it better, because No Child Left Behind is not perfect. We need some changes there, and I would have to. Well, that's true. That is true. That's true. That's true.
Well, just for the last minute or so, I want to give you a chance to just briefly tell about your website or a source that if a person wants more information on you. Kathy, why don't we begin with you? If somebody wants more information about who Kathy is.
Who Kathy is, How do you say that name?
Right. Muellerleile.
Muellerleile. You do it well, Tom. My website is weneedkathy.org.
Okay.
People can call me. I try to be there for them. My number is 507-451-9651.
Okay.
People call. We're door knocking. Everywhere I door knock, everywhere I go, I ask people 3 questions. What do you care about? What do you worry about? And what do you wish for? People want safe roads, good schools,
Good
a clean
questions.
environment. And so hopefully that's how they can get information about
Connie.
me.
Yes,
Website.
I have a website, absolutely, ConnieRuth.org. And you can go on there. I tell people you can call me 24/7. I used to tell them I was a general manager of cable television for 14 years. I would tell them, go ahead, and you still can, 24/7. I'm just there for everyone. And the ConnieRuth.org, but you also can get into the legislative area. It's not just the campaign side. We go in also into the legislative. So you can look up all the bills and everything. I had a number of bills that passed through. So happy to hear. I know we're out of time.
I wish we had more time. There are so many great issues that we can tackle on. But good luck to both of you.
Appreciate your
time.
time.
Appreciate you for being joining us today.
This is great. Thank you for helping
And
us.
also, voting is one of the key ways that you have for staying active in the decision-making process in this wonderful country that we live in. And so we do encourage you to exercise this right and this privilege. Remember, Election Day, November 7th, and there is great programming coming up on KSMQ. For KSMQ and KTTC, I'm Tom Overlay. Have a good night. Half an hour went by quickly, didn't it?
It does, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's good.